It's College Countdown, Josh and Jack edition, October 1st edition here. I'm Josh Neighbors. Alongside me, Jack Allen of Channel 7. You guys can find us on Twitter. I'm at Josh Neighbors _. This show is at CC Podcast JN, and Jack Allen is at Jack Allen TV. Like the video, sub to the channel as well. And also, we'll talk more about our friends at DraftKings. Jack and I live in Arkansas. We cover the Razorbacks. And we have mentioned and talked about Arkansas for a while now on this show. So what we're going to do on this show today is we're going to talk about the open jobs generally. And also, I have created the hired to get fired power rankings. I have picked my top 5 jobs that I think when you take the job, you are taking it to ultimately have it taken from you. So we'll see if Jack agrees with this. Part of this is based off recent history. Part of this is based off of situation, things like that. So I'll be interested to see what you think about those, Jack. Also, what the folks at home think about that. And also, we're going to rank the open jobs currently just based off our own assessment of those positions. So first of all, Jack, the Notre Dame game goes about as poorly as it can for Arkansas. And now there are 4 power jobs open. So your initial thoughts about what we saw this past weekend and things ending poorly. And now time is a flat circle. Bobby Petrino is once again the Arkansas head football coach.
Well, my initial thoughts are that I aged about 10 years over the course of 4 days. It's been a long weekend here in Arkansas, to say the least, but not something that I can say we didn't necessarily expect. I think whenever Arkansas came into that game against Notre Dame, there was sort of this idea that if they did not even if they had lost close, I think it still might have been enough to end up costing Sam Pittman his job just after the results against Ole Miss and Memphis leading into it. But to go out and lay the egg, one of the worst performances I've ever seen from a team in person. The fans were chanting like across the whole stadium, "Fire Sam Pittman," by the second quarter. And so there was an inevitability about it. The only question I had was, who would they put in charge when Sam was gone in the interim? Because, as much as it's a great story for Bobby Petrino to come back, from a PR standpoint, it's a little difficult just with how things ended the first time. And so there was a part of me that was like, maybe they just keep Sam Pittman around because you don't really have anybody to replace him with right now. And eventually his buyout was going to go down. But I think just from a momentum standpoint with the program, you couldn't afford to put together another performance like the one that we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, they couldn't afford to do it. And as we talked about last week, Petrino is back. He's lobbied to get the position full-time. He'll be in a position to, as good as anybody else, right? Because a couple of reasons. Number one, he's got the job, right? So I guess the best inside track to getting a job you want is having the job in the first place. Not the roster that he wants, obviously, but he'll have a chance to do so, and potentially the financial backing, which is going to end up being the big kind of conversation about all of this. And we'll go with that first. Let's actually go with the open jobs and how you'd rank them. So we've got 4 open power conference jobs at this point in time. We have got the Arkansas job, Oklahoma State job, UCLA job, and the Virginia Tech job. Those are the 4 right now that are open. We've seen Bruce Arians on behalf of the Virginia Tech program come out publicly and say, hey, there's going to be a cash infusion into the program. They're trying to improve more funds from the inside. Donors are promising more funds from the outside. Oklahoma State obviously is on the hunt as well. UCLA is, we'll get to that one in a second. And then Arkansas is kind of a big question mark with all of this. But I would just say, let's just say starting off, like when you think about those 4 jobs being open that I mentioned, which one jumps out to you the most? Because the one that I know for a fact jumps out to me the least is UCLA. There's a lot to do in Los Angeles. There's a lot of sports teams in Los Angeles. And UCLA football is really far down the pecking order. They're still behind USC football, and USC football is not where it was before, right? There are the Lakers, there are the Dodgers, there are the Rams. The Chargers don't really have fans anyway. And there's obviously the Clippers, you throw them into that mix as well. The Angels, even if you want to get down to it, down the line. The Kings, I mean, there's just so much sports to choose from. And obviously, even on its own campus, UCLA has got basketball. That's kind of where I'd go last. And then it's kind of a crap shoot the rest of the way. It's kind of a, hey, make a case for one of these jobs. So do you first agree with the fact that UCLA is probably number 4 on this list? And then where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think UCLA is definitely number 4 on this list, just in terms of recent success, in terms of where they are in their own market, in terms of money that's being infused into the program. Like, I think they're at the bottom in all of those compared to the other 3 schools on that list. And then, like you said, it gets very interesting, and I think it depends on what you're looking for in a program, because to me, Virginia Tech stands out just because of that cash infusion that's coming in. And there's a chance to kind of ride that rocket and get that instant boost of success just by nature of having a program that's more invested than what it has been. You can find more success just naturally through that. And so if you're a coach that's looking maybe to use it as a stepping stone, like, there's a lot of encouraging potential there, knowing that you're going to be in a better position than the guy that came before you. On the flip side of that, I would say there's Arkansas, who is one of those kind of destination jobs, just in the sense that it's in the SEC. You're going to be dealing with the financial benefits that come with that. Now, they haven't necessarily ponied up any extra money necessarily. Hunter Yurachek said they're going to have a deeper assistant pool. They're going to have a deeper head coach salary pool. I just don't know if the rest of the infrastructure is there to compete at the same level with the rest of their conference. So that's the thing, is that I think Virginia Tech is maybe, with that cash infusion, better positioned to have an instant jump from one level to the next. But Arkansas is a job that comes with a lot of benefits just from being in the SEC. And then there's Oklahoma State that's somewhere in the middle. And I just haven't necessarily publicly heard as much about Oklahoma State getting that same cash infusion that Virginia Tech has.
And part of this also goes to the how to win, right? Like, so something I always mention all the time about the Big 12, and I'll show this now using the old share screen feature, which I love to use all the time, is that since the Big 12 championship game, since 2020 is the first year, I like to go from there. So they lose OU in Texas, obviously, that's when it's announced. But you look since the 20 season, you've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 different teams have played for a Big 12 championship since 2020. So out of 10 possible slots, you've had 10 separate teams play, or it's 8 separate teams play rather for it. The only repeat teams that you see are actually Oklahoma State and Iowa State. Now, I'm not saying this as a notch in the belt for Oklahoma State. What I'm saying it is opportunity, right? That there is opportunity there in the Big 12 conference for you to go and play, not just for a conference title, but obviously what comes with that, a spot in the college football playoff. I would also make that same case if you go over and you look at the ACC championship results as well. Now, this one is a bit more of a, there have been a lot of teams that have played the 2 teams that have been there, right? Florida State and Clemson have, if you look even back, to 2011, hey, Clemson, Florida State, Clemson. So, their majority of the years, I think, except for 2021, either FSU or Clemson has been in the ACC championship game. Now, with that being said, if you look at the other teams, SMU, Louisville, Carolina, Wake Forest, Pitt, Notre Dame, UVA, Pitt, Miami, Virginia Tech, UNC, Georgia Tech, Duke. So up and down the line, there is opportunity there to go and play for a conference title. Not necessarily win it, as we see the teams that have been highlighted in these colors. If you're watching on YouTube, the success has been held, but there is opportunity there to go and play for a championship, especially as we're seeing right now with how weakened Clemson and even Florida State to some extent have been. We just saw Virginia go and knock off, and this is going to happen, I think, more often in conferences like the ACC and the Big 12. Is that talent being more spread around will impact. I still think the Big 10 especially, you're going to have your top dogs beat top dogs. SEC maybe a little bit more distribution, but still, I think I'd venture to say we're still going to see Alabama's, Georgia's, Texas's, up there. Maybe a little bit more, Missouri's punching up occasionally. But there is more opportunity at those jobs to counter what you're saying about, hey, the fact that it is an SEC job.
Yeah.
There is opportunity at places like Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech.
Well, and that's, we talked about it last week about the Big 12. It's not only just this idea that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of teams that play for the championship games, but there's a lot of opportunity to move very quickly up the standings, in the sense that Baylor can go from being at the bottom to then winning a Big 12 championship. Or Arizona State can, like, that's the whole reason they got rid of the preseason poll, was they were sick of teams being picked to finish, 10th in the conference and ending up in the conference championship game. They said, why are we still doing this? Because there is that much turnover and it's that easy. Like, the margins between the top and the bottom are so thin that if you can take a step forward, you can pass 5, 6, 7 teams in any given year. And so, like, that's what makes those two jobs appetizing compared to an Arkansas. The question is, which do you value, and also which pays more? Josh, that's always the question. Is, at the end of the day, winning matters, but also getting that paycheck counts a lot too.
Yeah, and this will go to our conversation we're about to have about, like, which the hired to get fired power rankings. But I'll ask you here, Jack, like, where would you stack these? If you're forced to. Yeah, UCLA last. Because we mentioned this too, I think, last week, but like, playing the Rose Bowl is cool, but you want to play in the Rose Bowl, not not October 1st Rose Bowl. Like, you want to play January 1st Rose Bowl. You want to
play when the sunset's going down on New Year's Day. Like, that's the Rose Bowl you want. So UCLA is 4. I think we can agree on that. I would position right now, I'd say Virginia Tech 1, Oklahoma State 2, Arkansas 3, in terms of if you are taking a job to win football games. Now, in terms of, like, prestige, like, that's obviously not the only factor that goes into making these decisions. And so, you could convince me it's Arkansas, Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, just depending on what you value. But in terms of, like, positioned to take a leap and positioned to find early success, that's probably the way I'd put it.
Yeah, power dynamics can change so fast in the sport. I go back to when I was working at SiriusXM, and I remember Holly Rowe and Gabe Biker had a debate, a bet about which team, Texas or OU, would win a conference championship in the SEC in the first 10 years. And back when the announcement was made that OU and Texas were heading to the SEC, Oklahoma was a dominant team, right? They were the dominant power, and things have flipped, right? I mean, the inability for Lincoln Riley to build defenses at OU, in which, actually, that's now, we've just taken the at OU part out of that one. The inability to build defenses, full stop, for Lincoln Riley has been a problem. But also, Sark was the right guy at Texas. Like, he went from going 5-7 his first year, blowing 11, first half leads, to, hey, look, Texas, despite what's happening with Arch Manning, they are now a year in, year out contender because the quality of player they have. These things can change pretty quickly.
Well, they invested so much in the trenches and the offensive and defensive line to get ready for that move to the SEC in a way that Oklahoma didn't. And so, like you said, just the perspectives on things changed so much over the course of 2 or 3 years, to where Texas can go from not winning Big 12 championships despite being the big brand in the conference to suddenly competing and playing in SEC championship games year 1.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that is, like, we think about this Arkansas job and how much money is available, and people say there's money, there's businesses. That's true, but, like, that doesn't mean that there's money to be had. Like, just because there's big business, and on the flip side of that, just because there does not appear to be much money does not mean that there's not money to be had. I use the state of Mississippi as obviously a very, very good example of, look, it's one of the poorer states in the union, but also they've got 2 SEC programs. And good talent evaluation. Look, like, is Mississippi State awesome? Are they amazing? No, but are they competent and good now under, like in year number 2 under Jeff Levy? They look better than they did before, and they're more competitive with Tennessee's of the world. And they're, certainly doing something different. Obviously, they're trying to. And then we've seen Ole Miss, has built more than just a competitive roster. And, we're seeing that, I know the landscape of college football has changed more, but last year's Ole Miss team figured to be the more competitive of the two when it came to, trying to get a national spot and get a college football playoff ranking. But turns out that the D2 quarterback they evaluated was the right guy. And even though they don't have the defensive line that they have last year, the quality of player they have, they're kind of this, well-rounded, well-coached machine right now. It's doing just enough in these games to win tight ball games and to execute and have long drives late in games when it matters. And just kind of this, I know it doesn't necessarily relate to these jobs, but it shows you like things can flip. So maybe these jobs appear a certain way right now because the way that we're seeing coaches kind of get the most out of certain rosters, and I would say more even rosters, can make these jobs more valuable than they appear at this moment in time.
For Arkansas, you just have to look across the street to basketball and Coach Cal, and the fact that, the right coach can unlock the money is the other part of it, is that like sometimes the money is there, like you said, and it just isn't being appropriately tapped into, and you don't have the right coach to do that. And if you can find the right coach to tap into the money, things can change in a hurry, and you can find that for whoever comes in.
All right, quickly, a word from our friends at DraftKings. Then we're going to go to the hired to get fired power rankings, which I think you guys are going to enjoy.
Your season, your shot. The NFL season is rolling, and every touchdown can bring you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. From first touchdown scorer to anytime TD props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. New customers, this one is for you. Bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, score over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NEIGHBORS. That's code NEIGHBORS to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first $5 bet. Plus over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Thanks to our friends at DraftKings. The crown is yours. For gambling help in New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort in Kansas. Fees may apply in Illinois, 21 plus, and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms, responsible gaming resources, please see dkng.co/audio. All right, so I have made these rankings, and these are my hired to get fired. So I saw an article from Mike Irwin in Northwest Arkansas about the past that Arkansas coaches had. And so it prompted me to go think about the jobs off the top of my head, Jack, that at least recently are like the hired to get fired. And so you'll see there's a couple admissions on here, but these are going to end up being ones that I feel pretty strongly about. And the reason why I've got Auburn number one is I've got, for those of you listening, Auburn's 1, Arkansas is 2, South Carolina is 3, UCLA is 4, Stanford is 5. So last week we had the release of the permanent rivals, or like semi-permanent rivals, I guess you could say, the consistent 3 teams that each SEC team will play. And Auburn has Georgia and Alabama, and I think they also got Vanderbilt. But like the fact that Georgia and Alabama are your 2 consistent rivals lines up with also the expectations for the program. They have had, and I was looking this up, since I think the 70s or 80s, everybody except for Tupperville has been canned. I believe Tommy stepped away, but he's like, I'm stepping away. And yeah, I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall. And so he stepped away. And that's why I think it's got to be first, because like it can all sound really, really good. And like Brian Harsin, Brian Harsin, I guess didn't really sound great, but it didn't work out very, very quickly. It went south quickly. Hugh Freeze, they were kind of building towards this year, and their offense is a complete disaster. And like they've actually built a team that, to me, Jack, that kind of resembles a lot of the teams that Gus built. Really good on defense, trying to run the football, but a quarterback just not strong enough. And to be honest, some of Gus's best teams were like that. Like Nick Marshall.
Nick Marshall was a quarterback.
Nick Marshall was not awesome, right? And then I just think that, you go back down the line, like Gus got canned, because it's just like, he'll surprise you, but also he'll surprise you in a negative way. Sometimes as well. Gene Chizik, I think, ended up having 1 or 2 winning seasons total, and he's a national championship winning coach, obviously. And you go on down the line, like they've had those issues. So to me, Auburn had to be number 1, just because of who the rivals are. And also, what does that look like functionally? Well, it kind of tracks with the Auburn coaching job, because I don't think you or I or many across the country would be surprised if Auburn became open once again after this season.
Well, it's such a volatile position. And it's just this idea of the fact that the expectations versus the reality and the competition level, and this idea that you're always expected to be competing for not just conference championships, but national championships. And you're expected to beat Alabama, and you're expected to compete and beat Georgia. And that's just such a high bar that even if you meet it a few times, eventually time is going to come for you when you do it every single year.
Yeah.
And so it's just, the expectations are so high, the bar is so high to clear, and the challenges of getting to that bar are so difficult that, I mean, like you said, plus, it's a fan base that has a lot of strong opinions.
Yeah. And like,
it's boosters that have strong opinions.
It's not, they're not close. Like, cause like they'll play, even when they're bad, like they've got the talent to play all these teams tough. It's just really difficult. And I understand they should think they're like, they're in the mix. You just have to understand it's like the worst lot in life to have. It really, really is. Like, it's just difficult. It's just hard. And I don't think that they're wrong for the way they see themselves.
And the common theme for you when I look at these teams, especially the SEC ones that you listed in there, is that it's those 3 teams, Auburn, Arkansas, South Carolina, are 3 teams that are really middle of the pack in a very difficult conference, but with fan bases that have expectations and hopes and dreams that they'll be higher than that. And so there's not, you're there, and even if people don't really expect you to hit that next point, like with Sam Pittman, there is eventually going to come a point where doing what's normal at that program is not enough. And you have to make a change just to make a change, just to breathe new life into a program that's gone stale. And I think that you find that a lot, especially when I look at Arkansas and South Carolina. I feel like that's the weird purgatory that they live in.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you see the Arkansas teams, they're playing LSU. It's been a rival for a long time, and just they have better access to talent being in Louisiana, and then Texas. And Texas is Texas, right? So that's what makes it difficult. And for those folks who don't know out there, like if you look at the hit list of Arkansas coaches, I mean, Pittman fired, Chad Morris fired, Brett Bielema fired, John L. Smith. Does that fire resignate? I mean, technically, but they can fire him anyway. 4-8. Petrino fired for cause, so it's a little bit different, right? Houston Nutt resigns, but I think it was after an 8-5 year. But I mean, come on, like the talent they had, they should have been a little bit better than they were. To be quite, at least in my opinion, I think Danny Ford. I'd have to look to see how that one ended as well, but you can kind of see like, hey. This was, let's see, his final year was 4-7 for Danny Ford, his final 2 years when he was coaching at Arkansas. So you can kind of see like the point here is that, like, look, you can say it might not be a job where you're hired to get fired, but the reason why I'm making this list is if you're Rhett Lashley and you're at this point of your coaching career and you look at the history of Arkansas coaches, back to Danny Ford last 30 years or so, this is not a job that guarantees long-term staying power. I mean, Petrino was really good here, and you've had multiple coaches resign and whatnot, but like this is a job that, right, wrong, or indifferent, has ended poorly for a lot of guys that we actually think are pretty good coaches.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem, is that like longevity, it depends on what you define as longevity, because I think in coaching circles, longevity is a lot different than it is in most other circles of life. In that, like Sam Pittman, at the end of the day, like, yes, he got fired. Yes, it ended poorly. He was also the coach for more than 5 seasons, which I think in a lot of places and in a lot of coaching realms is a lot of time, and so to be able to to say, oh, this job doesn't have longevity, doesn't have, he got to a second contract. So,
Yeah.
And so but at the end of the day, you can only ride that wave of sustainability so long, because the problem is, even if you are sustainably at a certain level, eventually the expectation is going to be that we have to do something to get to a new level. And I think that's what we find so often in these jobs, is just that battle between what fans like to call complacency, or not wanting to win, or settling for mediocrity.
Yeah.
Eventually that sets in, even if you are doing a job and putting the program where it theoretically should be.
Or, you think about, like, for, to use the Arkansas example, and this happens in places like South Carolina, where it's like you win 8 games and all of a sudden it becomes an expectation. I mean, when in reality, it's like, it's not been the case. I mean, South Carolina's third in this list. And if you go down their list of coaches too, like Will Muschamp was 28 and 30, as Shane Beamer's 29 and 22, which is kind of above the bar. Steve Spurrier, had a bunch of really strong years, obviously, and he's kind of the outlier in terms of how his coaching tenure, ended up going. But, you look at the end, like it was 7-6, then it was 2-4, and you could kind of tell it was heading in that direction. Once again, he is the kind of the outlier, in that job. And then, Lou Holtz, 33 and 37, Brad Scott before that was 23 and 32, right? So these jobs, especially South Carolina, because they're in the South, and like they border Georgia, and then they border the Carolinas and Virginia, but like they don't get the consistent amount of talent that some of these other schools do get. And so that's why I would have it third, but still, I feel like the expectation gets like reset. Like it's not permanent for them. The expectation kind of gets reset for them more often than I think it does get reset for other schools. So I would put that's why I had the 3 SEC schools first, because I think it's just different in the SEC, and the next 2 are West Coast schools, ironically.
Well, and so you have Stanford on there, and the Stanford brings its own issues just in terms of bringing in talent, in terms of figuring out how to make it work with a university that has high academic standards, with a fan base that is not super invested even when they're great. It's just such a difficult job to find success in, but it has historic success.
Yeah, and actually recent success. Both David Shaw and Harbaugh were good there.
Yeah. And so there's this idea of you can make Stanford work, but how does that functionally work? And how does that functionally work in modern college football, post NIL, post revenue sharing, post all of that, when you're playing in the ACC against schools that are a 5-hour plane flight away?
Yeah, and also, like, it appears that Duke, Vanderbilt, and Notre Dame have all lowered their academic standards, and I can't tell if Stanford has done that. Maybe they have, but like I don't know if Stanford has done that. And once again, it's hard to tell how much they care. And then UCLA too, they're up there because of like fan apathy. Like I just don't know if people care. It's a great. I mean, Westwood's a nice place to live. It's a good job, but Chip Kelly left that job to go be a coordinator elsewhere, so it can't be that great of a job if that is the case. And so, but do you feel good about having those 3 SEC jobs above there? Is there any change you would make to my list the way it's constituted?
I like what you've got. I like the 5 that you have there. I'm trying to think in terms of like, is there a Big Ten school that, maybe like a Purdue that could?
I thought about, Purdue. Yeah. I thought about Kentucky, but Kentucky.
Mark Stoops has been there forever. Like you look at it, I don't think they have the expectations at the same level that the other 3 schools we have listed do.
All right, Jack, where can folks find you in your work and all of its variety?
You can find me, Jack Allen TV, on Twitter, and then KTV.com. Catch me on the weekends on Channel 7 here in Arkansas. And, you can always watch us whenever you're not in Arkansas, KTV.com. But, yeah, a lot of good Arkansas stuff.
Make sure you guys find us at CC Podcast, JN on Twitter. I'm at Josh Neighbors _. Find the show wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Like the video, sub to the channel, and leave us your comments. Would you put either of these 2 lists? How would you rank the open jobs? And also in the hired to get fired rankings, where would you all rank those? We'll see you guys next week.